They called him King Jacob once, but now, at 17 years old, his frail frame barely casts a shadow in the Arizona desert, where he quietly roams. Once the fiercest leader of a mighty pride near Tucson, his mane now thins with the wind, and his once mighty roar has softened into a whisper. He left behind everything, his lionesses, his cubs, his legacy, because age doesn't ask permission. I watched him walk away from his own kingdom, like a soldier surrendering to time. Why did he choose solitude over comfort? That's when he disappeared into the Red Cliffs. And something incredible happened. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. There's more to uncover about Jacob's incredible journey and the miracle that changed his fate forever. Stay tuned. Jacob didn't just vanish into the wilderness, he vanished into legend. For weeks, no one knew where the old lion had gone, but I followed his tracks, not just in the dust, but in the stories left behind. Claw marks on tree trunks, scattered feathers from birds, too slow to escape. High up in the red rock canyons of Arizona, where even the bravest coyotes dare not tread, Jacob had found a small cave wedged between the cliffs. It wasn't much, just a patch of shade and silence, but it was his sanctuary. Every morning, he'd step out and raise his weary head toward the sky, not to roar, but to listen. The wind that once carried the echoes of his power now whispered something else, something that only the forgotten understand. Locals whispered about a ghost lion, howling at sunrise, limping through the brush, eyes still burning with that regal fire. But the truth was far more human than myth. Jacob wasn't just surviving, he was remembering. Sometimes I'd catch him sitting still for hours, eyes locked on the horizon, like he was waiting for something to return, or someone. And yet, despite the pain etched into every movement, he never stopped walking, never stopped searching. What was he looking for? Redemption? Peace? Or perhaps just a place to lay down for the last time, somewhere quiet, away from the world that forgot him? Then came that cold October afternoon. The moment everything changed. The sky over Arizona darkened with gray, and the wind picked up like it was carrying a warning. Jacob had spotted a young mule deer, lingering too long near a rocky outcrop. Hunger is crueler than time, and despite his age, Jacob summoned what little strength he had left. He crouched, muscles trembling, and lunged forward. It wasn't the graceful pounce of his youth. No, this was desperation. The deer bolted, and Jacob gave chase, his massive paws scraping against loose gravel, each stride more painful than the last. I watched from a distance, frozen in disbelief. He wasn't hunting for sport. He was fighting for survival. As the deer disappeared over a steep ridge, Jacob followed, too focused to see the loose rock shifting beneath his feet. Then it happened. His hind legs slipped, and his body careened over the edge. A sickening thud echoed through the canyon as he caught himself on a narrow ledge, claws digging deep into the dirt. He roared, not with strength, but with fear. The sound wasn't like the old Jacob. It was hollow, filled with years of pride and the terror of finality. I stood paralyzed. That lion, once untouchable, now dangled between life and death. And I knew, if I didn't act fast, Jacob's story would end on a cliffside, alone. For 3 long hours, Jacob clung to that ledge like a ghost caught between two worlds. The canyon wind howled, tugging at his thinning mane, while bits of gravel crumbled beneath his claws and tumbled into the void. His breaths came in ragged bursts, each one a battle. I could hear his low growls echoing off the stone walls, first fierce, then hoarse, then barely a whisper. But he didn't let go, not yet. His eyes, once blazing with dominance, now shimmered with something deeper. Fear, yes, but also a stubborn refusal to die forgotten. I called for help, radioed the ranger station, but the signal was weak, patchy at best. The nearest team was hours away. Time was something Jacob no longer had. I paced the ridge, helpless, watching a living legend fade before my eyes. Every time he tried to claw upward, his paws slipped just a bit more. Blood smeared the rock where his claws fought for grip. Still, He didn't surrender. There was something heartbreakingly human in the way he struggled, like a soldier refusing to fall until the last breath was spent. I shouted down to him, my voice cracking, "Hold on, old man. You've made it this far." And for a moment, he looked up at me, not with panic, but with recognition, as if to say, "You see me. You remember." That was the moment I made the decision. Rules, training, protocol, none of it mattered. This wasn't about wildlife management anymore. This was about doing what was right. I grabbed my emergency rope, secured it to a nearby boulder, and lowered myself down, inch by inch, toward Jacob. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the wind. Every foot I descended, the cliff creaked and shifted beneath me. One wrong move, and we'd both fall. But I kept going, drawn by something I still can't explain. A connection, a calling, maybe even redemption of my own. Jacob didn't growl when he saw me. He didn't lunge or bare his teeth. He just blinked, slowly, his breathing shallow. His body was shaking from the cold and the pain, but when I got close enough to speak, he tilted his head ever so slightly, as if he understood. I whispered, "Easy, boy. I'm not here to hurt you." His eyes softened. I think, in that moment, the king let down his guard, and I saw not a predator, not a beast, but a soul. Carefully, I wrapped the harness around his front legs, every movement deliberate, every breath held. His body was heavy, but I felt the weight of something greater, trust. Somehow, he believed in me. The climb back up was the hardest thing I've ever done. Every pull of the rope was like lifting the weight of time itself. Jacob wasn't just a lion. He was history, memory, survival, all bundled into one aching, exhausted body. His paws dangled beside me as I inched upward, our bodies swaying dangerously with each gust of canyon wind. My arms burned, my back screamed, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Because I'd seen something in his eyes down there, something that said he still wanted to live. Just when my muscles felt like they'd tear apart, I reached the top. With one last grunt, I hauled him over the edge. He collapsed in the dirt, chest heaving, too tired to move. I collapsed beside him, gasping for air, sweat pouring down my face. For a moment, neither of us moved. The canyon was quiet again, as if holding its breath. Then slowly, Jacob raised his head. He looked at me, not with suspicion, not with pride, but with something deeper, something almost sacred. And before I could say a word, he did something I'll never forget. He lowered his great head to the ground, bowing, not in submission, but in thanks. That single gesture erased every barrier between us, man and beast, rescuer and legend. We were just two souls who'd stared into the abyss and come back together. Jacob didn't walk away, not immediately. He stood there on trembling legs just a few feet from me, as if unsure what came next. His breathing was still ragged, but his eyes never left mine. I stayed completely still, heart pounding, not from fear anymore, but from awe. Here was a lion who had once ruled the plains, now barely holding himself upright, and yet he refused to fall. Slowly, he took a step toward me. My instinct screamed to back away, but something deeper rooted me to the ground. He didn't growl. He didn't roar. He simply leaned his massive head close enough that I could feel the warmth of his breath on my skin. Then, with the quiet dignity of a king stripped of his crown but not his soul, he rubbed his head gently against my shoulder. My eyes burned. I'd spent my life around wild animals, but this was something else. This was acknowledgement, acceptance, maybe even gratitude. And then, just as slowly, Jacob turned away. He limped towards the canyon edge, not to leap, but to look. The sun had begun to break through the clouds, casting golden light across the desert floor. He stood there, framed by sunlight, his silhouette no longer frail but noble. That image is burned into my memory forever. Jacob didn't just disappear into the canyon shadows. He walked with purpose, like a soldier returning from war. His steps were slow, deliberate, and each paw print he left behind in the soft red dirt felt like a mark of something sacred. I didn't follow. I knew better. That final stretch, that return into the wild, belonged to him alone. But he stopped, just once, halfway down the trail. He turned his head and looked back at me. And in that brief second, our eyes locked across the distance. No words, no sounds, just a silent farewell between two souls who had survived something extraordinary together. I raised my hand instinctively, not to wave, but to honor him, like saluting an old friend or a fallen hero who somehow got back up. And then, without a sound, Jacob disappeared beyond the ridge, swallowed by the land he came from. The canyon was quiet again, but it didn't feel empty. It felt full, with meaning, with memory, with something bigger than either of us. I stood there for a long time after he left, staring into the place where the wild and the human world had met for one brief, miraculous moment. It wasn't just a rescue, it was a redemption. His, and maybe mine too. Weeks passed, but I couldn't shake the image of Jacob fading into the wild. Every morning, I'd return to that ridge, hoping for a glimpse of him, a sound, a sign, anything to tell me he was still out there. At first, nothing, just the wind and silence. But one day, I found something that stopped me cold. A single paw print, freshly pressed into the canyon dust, right near where we had parted ways. It wasn't just proof of life, it was a message. He had come back, if only for a moment, to let me know he was still fighting. I knelt beside that print and felt something deep stir inside me. Jacob had survived, somehow, and more than that, he remembered, the boundary between man and beast had shifted that day on the cliff, and now I carried a piece of that wildness inside me. It changed the way I saw the world. Every rescued animal, every trail I walked after that, held deeper meaning. I had witnessed something rare, a moment of pure, wordless connection that defied everything we thought we knew about nature. And Jacob, I believe he's still out there. Maybe he's resting in the shade of a high canyon tree, or maybe he's standing proud beneath the stars, his old heart still beating strong in the quiet night. The story of Jacob, the aging lion, reminds us that dignity doesn't fade with time. It evolves. In a world that often values youth and strength, this tale speaks to something deeper. Resilience, quiet courage, and the unspoken bonds we form when we choose compassion over fear. Like Jacob, many of us will face seasons of decline where our bodies falter but our spirits remain intact. What matters most in those moments isn't how loudly we roar, but how deeply we're remembered for our perseverance, our humility, and the quiet way we still choose to rise. Just as Kamau reached beyond the rules to save a creature society might have given up on, we too must reach for those around us who are silently clinging to hope. Sometimes, the greatest act of strength is showing kindness when the world least expects it, and receiving it with grace when it finally comes.